The wind howled like a wounded animal across the frozen tundra, carrying shards of ice that stung Ina's weathered face. She pulled her fur hood tighter, squinting against the blizzard that had swept down from the northern mountains without warning. The Sky Elk tribe had learned to read the land's moods, but this storm had come too fast, too fierce. As if the spirits themselves were angry, Ina's breath formed clouds in the frigid air as she trudged through knee-deep snow, her spear gripped tight in frostbitten fingers. She'd been tracking the mammoth herd for 3 days, watching their massive forms move like brown mountains across the white landscape. Her tribe needed meat desperately. The winter had been cruel, stretching longer than the elders could remember, and their food stores were dangerously low. The crack came suddenly, sharp as lightning splitting the sky. Ina froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. The sound echoed across the empty plains, followed by a deep, rumbling groan that seemed to rise from the earth itself. She scrambled up a snow-covered ridge, her boots slipping on hidden ice, and when she reached the top, her breath caught in her throat. Below, in a shallow ravine carved by ancient waters, a massive bull mammoth thrashed in agony. The ice beneath it had shattered, revealing a hidden crevasse that had swallowed the creature's rear legs. The mammoth's tusks, long as 3 men lying end to end, gouged deep furrows in the snow as it struggled. Its trumpet of pain and rage made Ina's bones vibrate. She should run back to the village, gather the hunters, bring them to this gift from the spirits. A trapped mammoth meant survival for her entire tribe. But something held her in place, some instinct honed by 23 winters of reading the land's secrets. The ice groaned again, a sound like bones breaking. The mammoth lurched violently, its massive weight shifting as it fought to escape. Ina watched in horror as the ice around the crevasse spiderwebbed with cracks, spreading outward like frozen lightning. The creature's movements grew more desperate, more panicked, and then with a final thunderous crack, the entire section of frozen ground gave way. The mammoth disappeared into the ravine with a sound that Ina would hear in her nightmares for years to come. Snow and ice exploded upward in a white cloud, and when it settled, an eerie silence fell over the landscape. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Ina's legs moved before her mind caught up, carrying her down the ridge in a sliding, stumbling run. She knew she should be cautious. Wounded animals were dangerous, and a dying mammoth could still kill with a single swing of its massive head. But something pulled her forward, some voice in her blood that whispered urgency. When she reached the edge of the collapsed ice, she peered down into the ravine. The mammoth lay on its side, unmoving, its chest still. Blood stained the white snow black in the fading afternoon light. The fall had broken its neck, ending its struggle instantly. Ina whispered a prayer of thanks to the spirits, asking forgiveness for the creature's death, even as she calculated how much meat it would provide. Her tribe could feast for weeks, could make it through the worst of winter if they preserved the flesh properly. She would be celebrated as a hero, as the hunter who'd found the impossible gift. But then she saw it, a flash of color beneath the mammoth's massive shoulder. Not the brown fur of the beast, but something else. Something that made her blood run cold. Human skin. Ina's breath stopped. She scrambled down the icy slope, her heart racing, forgetting all caution. When she reached the bottom, she circled the mammoth's corpse, and there, partially crushed beneath thousands of pounds of dead weight, was a man. He lay face down in the snow, his body twisted at an unnatural angle. His furs were torn and bloodied, and Ina could see the rise and fall of his ribs, shallow and labored, alive, impossibly alive. She dropped to her knees beside him, her hands hovering over his body, unsure where to touch, where it was safe to touch. The mammoth's shoulder pinned his legs, but his upper body was free. She could see dark bruises already forming along his exposed back, see the cuts where ice had sliced through skin. "Can you hear me?" Ina's voice came out rough, unused to speaking after days of solitary hunting. "Stay still. I'll help you." The man groaned, a sound so faint she almost missed it beneath the wind's howl. His fingers twitched in the snow, and Ina saw that his hands were bound with crude rope. Not bound by the fall, bound before. Her mind raced. A prisoner, an exile, someone left to die in the frozen waste. She had to free him, had to get him out before hypothermia claimed what the mammoth hadn't crushed. Aina pulled her stone knife from her belt and began sawing at the ropes around his wrists. The fibers were frozen solid, making her work agonizingly slow. Her fingers, already numb from the cold, fumbled with the blade. Finally, the ropes snapped. The man's arms fell limp to his sides. "I need to move you," Aina said, though she wasn't sure he could hear her. "This will hurt." She grabbed his shoulders and pulled. The man screamed, a raw sound of agony that cut through the storm. Aina's stomach twisted, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. If she left him here, he would die within the hour. Inch by inch, she dragged him away from the mammoth's corpse. His legs came free with a sickening sound, and Aina saw with relief that they weren't crushed, only trapped. Bruised and battered, but whole. He might walk again, if infection didn't set in, if the cold didn't steal his toes and fingers first. When she'd pulled him a safe distance away, Aina finally let herself look at his face. She brushed snow and blood away from his features, and her breath caught for the second time that day. Even through the grime and injury, she could see he was young, perhaps her own age or slightly older. Strong features, a jaw dark with several days' growth of beard. But it was the markings on his cheek that made her blood freeze in her veins. Blue and black paint, smeared but still visible. 3 slashing lines, like claw marks, running from temple to jaw, the mark of the Stone Wolf clan. Aina jerked her hands back as if burned. Her mind screamed at her to leave him, to let the cold finish what the mammoth had started. The Stone Wolves were enemies, had been enemies since before her grandmother's grandmother walked the earth. They raided the Sky Elk hunting grounds, stole their food stores, killed their warriors without mercy. Last summer, Stone Wolf raiders had attacked a Sky Elk camp, killing 5 people. One of them had been Aina's cousin, barely 15 winters old. She should leave him, should walk away and let the spirits decide his fate. But as she stared down at his unconscious face, watching his chest struggle for each breath, she found she couldn't move. Couldn't abandon him to die alone in the snow, no matter what markings he wore. Aina cursed herself for a fool, even as she began stripping off her outer furs. She wrapped them around the stranger's shivering body, binding his injuries as best she could with strips torn from her inner layers. The storm was worsening, the sky darkening toward night. She couldn't make it back to her village before dark, not in this weather, and carrying an unconscious man would be impossible. Her emergency shelter. The small cave she'd prepared 3 days' walk from the village, stocked with firewood and dried meat for extended hunts. It was close, perhaps half a day's journey if she pushed hard. Aina fashioned a crude travois from fallen branches and strips of hide, lashing the stranger to it with the same rope that had bound his wrists. She tested the weight, her muscles screaming in protest, and began to pull. The journey was hell. Every step was agony, her feet sinking into drifts, the travois catching on hidden obstacles. The wind fought her, trying to tear her burden away. Several times she fell, her exhausted body refusing to rise, and each time she forced herself up, forced herself to keep moving. The stranger's life depended on her strength. And despite everything, despite the tribal hatred burned into her since childhood, Aina found she couldn't let him die. When she finally reached the cave as darkness swallowed the world, she was barely conscious herself. She dragged the travois inside, collapsed beside it, and let the blackness take her. Aina woke to the sound of labored breathing that wasn't her own. For a moment, disoriented in the darkness, she couldn't remember where she was. Then the events of the previous day crashed back, and she jerked upright, her body protesting every movement. The cave was pitch black, except for the faint grey light seeping through the entrance, where snow had drifted during the night. The stranger lay where she'd left him, still bound to the travois, his chest rising and falling in shallow gasps that rattled with fluid. Aina's hunter instincts kicked in immediately. She fumbled for her fire-starting kit with numb fingers, striking flint against stone until sparks caught in the dried moss she'd stored here months ago. The small flame grew, fed by carefully placed kindling, until a proper fire blazed in the cave's central pit. Light and warmth flooded the space, and Dinah could finally see the extent of the stranger's injuries. He was worse than she'd thought. His skin had taken on a grey pallor, and his lips were blue. Hypothermia had set in during the night, stealing his body's heat despite her furs. She needed to warm him fast. Aina stripped away the bloodied furs, examining his body for wounds. Bruises covered his torso in shades of purple and black, and several ribs felt wrong beneath her probing fingers, likely cracked or broken. His left arm was swollen, possibly sprained, but no major bleeding, no bones protruding through skin. The cold had probably saved his life, slowing his blood flow, preventing him from bleeding out beneath the mammoth. She heated stones in the fire, wrapped them in hide, and placed them around his body. Then she dug through her supplies, finding the pouches of healing herbs her mother had taught her to use. Willow bark for pain and fever, yarrow to stop bleeding, comfrey for the bruises. As she worked, grinding herbs between stones, mixing them with melted snow water, Aina's mind churned. What was she doing? This man was Stonewolf. When he woke, he might try to kill her. Even if he didn't, what then? She couldn't take him to her village. They would execute him on sight. Probably execute her, too, for harboring an enemy, and she couldn't simply release him to find his way back to his own people. He was too injured, would never survive the journey alone. The Stone Wolves' territory was weeks away across treacherous winter terrain. She'd trapped herself with this act of mercy. Trapped them both, the stranger groaned, pulling Aina from her spiraling thoughts. His eyes flickered beneath their lids, and his fingers twitched, reaching for something in fevered dreams. She forced the herbal mixture between his cracked lips, massaging his throat to make him swallow. "Drink," she murmured, falling into the gentle tone her mother had used when treating the sick. "You need to drink." Most of the liquid dribbled down his chin, but some went down. Aina repeated the process until the bowl was empty, then settled beside him to wait. Either the fever would break or he would die. She'd done all she could. Hours passed. Aina dozed fitfully, waking every time the stranger's breathing changed rhythm. She kept the fire fed, kept the heated stones warm against his skin, forced more medicine between his lips when his fever spiked. Outside, the blizzard raged for 3 days straight. Snow piled so deep against the cave entrance that Aina had to dig a tunnel just to reach outside for more firewood from her emergency cache. The storm trapped them as surely as prison walls. 2 people from enemy tribes sharing space no larger than 6 paces across. On the 4th morning, the stranger's eyes opened. Aina was adding wood to the fire when she felt his gaze on her. She turned slowly, her hand instinctively moving to the knife at her belt. Their eyes met across the flames, his dark as winter earth, hers the pale grey of storm clouds. For a long moment, neither spoke. Aina watched emotions flicker across his face. Confusion, pain, weariness, and something else she couldn't name. He tried to sit up, groaned, and collapsed back onto the furs she'd piled beneath him. "Don't move," Aina said, her voice sharp with command. "You have broken ribs. You'll puncture a lung." The stranger stared at her, and she saw the moment he registered her tribal markings. Her face bore the sweeping lines of the Sky Elk clan, painted in red ochre and white clay. His eyes widened, and his hand reached for a weapon that wasn't there. "Your Sky Elk," he rasped, his voice rough from days of fever and disuse. "And your Stone Wolf," Aina replied evenly. "I found you trapped beneath a dead mammoth 4 days ago. You were dying. I brought you here. Why?" The question came out harsh, suspicious. "Why save an enemy?" Aina had asked herself the same question 100 times in the past 4 days. She still didn't have a good answer. "I don't know," she admitted finally. "Stupidity, maybe. Or weakness. My chief would say mercy is just another word for foolishness." Something flickered in the stranger's eyes at the mention of chiefs, there and gone so fast Aina almost missed it. He relaxed slightly against the furs, though weariness remained in every line of his body. "I'm Aina," she offered, though she immediately wondered if giving her name was another foolish act. Aina of the Sky Elk clan, daughter of Mira the healer. The stranger was quiet for so long, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then Kor, he said finally. Just Kor. No clan affiliation. No parentage, just a name, which meant he either didn't trust her or was hiding something. Aina supposed she couldn't blame him for either. Well, just Kor, she said, attempting lightness despite the tension crackling between them. You're going to be stuck here with me until the storm passes and you can walk. So we might as well try to be civil. And then? Kor asked. When I can walk, what happens then? Aina turned back to the fire, avoiding his eyes. I don't know, she said quietly. I haven't thought that far ahead. The truth was, she'd been trying not to think about it at all. About what would happen when this impossible situation finally ended. About the impossible choices she'd have to make. The days that followed developed a strange rhythm. Kor's body slowly healed, his fever breaking completely after a week. The bruises faded from black to purple to greenish yellow. His broken ribs knitted, though they still pained him when he breathed deeply. The blizzard outside continued its assault, trapping them in their small world of firelight and forced proximity. At first, they barely spoke. Aina would tend his wounds in silence, prepare meals of dried meat and melted snow water, then retreat to the far side of the cave. Kor would watch her with those dark, unreadable eyes, accepting her care with visible discomfort, as if her touch burned despite its gentleness. But isolation has a way of breaking down walls. By the second week, they'd begun to talk, carefully at first, skirting around anything too personal or tribal. How did you end up under that mammoth? Aina asked one evening as she changed the poultice on his ribs. You were bound, exiled. Kor's jaw tightened. Something like that. My clan. We had a disagreement about the direction we should take. The elders decided the disagreement would end if I ended. They left you to die? Aina's hands stilled on his skin, horrified despite herself. Your own people? Not my people, Kor said bitterly. Not anymore. He met her eyes, and in them she saw pain that had nothing to do with physical wounds. Turns out being right doesn't matter if you're not strong enough to make others listen. Aina understood that feeling more than she cared to admit. Her own tribe viewed her as too soft, too prone to mercy when they valued strength. She'd been passed over for roles in the council, dismissed by warriors who saw her healer's heart as weakness. Maybe that was why she'd saved him. Because she saw something of herself in his eyes. As the days stretched on, their conversations deepened. Kor told her about his childhood in the Stone Wolf camp, about learning to hunt on the northern ice fields where white bears ruled. Aina spoke of the southern valleys where the sky elk hunted, of summers when the tundra bloomed with flowers and life seemed eternal. They carefully avoided talk of raids, of the violence between their peoples. Some truths were too dangerous to speak aloud in this fragile peace. One night, when the fire burned low and the cave filled with shadows, Kor finally asked the question Aina had been dreading. What happens when the storm ends, Aina? You still haven't answered. She stared into the flames, watching them dance and flicker. I can't take you to my village. They'd kill you. Kill me too, probably, for harboring an enemy. And you can't let me go back to mine, Kor said softly. Because they're the ones who tried to kill me in the first place. So we're both trapped, Aina whispered. By circumstance. By choices that seemed right at the time. Maybe, Kor said. He shifted on his furs, wincing as his ribs protested, until he could see her face clearly in the firelight. Or maybe we're free. Free from tribes that would rather kill than question. Free to choose something different. There is no different, Aina said, but her voice lacked conviction. Our peoples have been enemies for generations. One act of mercy won't change that. No, Kor agreed. But it's a start. Their eyes met across the fire, and Aina felt something shift in her chest, some wall she'd maintained crumbling despite her best efforts. This man should be her enemy. Everything she'd been taught said she should hate him. Should have left him to die beneath that mammoth, but sitting here in the firelight, sharing warmth. The storm finally broke on the 18th day. Aina woke to silence so complete it felt unnatural after weeks of constant wind. She crawled to the cave entrance, pushing through the snow tunnel she'd maintained, and emerged into a world transformed. The tundra stretched out in endless white, unmarked by footprints or wind patterns. The sky arced overhead in brilliant blue, so clear it hurt to look at. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the pristine landscape. Beautiful, peaceful, and terrifyingly empty. Kor joined her at the entrance, moving stiffly but under his own power. His ribs had healed enough that he could walk, though not yet run or fight. He stood beside her, and together they stared out at the frozen world. "We can't stay here," Aina said quietly. "Food's running low, and eventually someone will come looking. Your hunters?" Kor asked. "Maybe, or yours, or worse, both." She turned to him, forcing herself to meet his eyes. "We need to make a decision, Kor. What happens now?" Before he could answer, a sound cut through the morning air. A horn, distant but clear, carrying across the frozen plain. Then another from a different direction. And another. Aina's blood turned to ice. "Hunting parties," she whispered. "Multiple tribes." Kor's expression hardened. "Looking for the mammoth. Word must have spread about a kill in this area." "Your people, mine?" "Both, probably." Aina's mind raced, calculating distances, timing. "And if they find us together—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. They both knew what would happen. The fragile peace they'd built in their cave would shatter against the reality of generations of hatred. Their tribes would see only enemies, not two people who'd shared warmth and stories through the long dark. "We run," Kor said decisively. "Now, before they close in." "Run where?" Aina demanded. "There's nowhere to go. No neutral ground. Nowhere either of us would be safe. Then we make our own," Kor said. He grabbed her shoulders, his grip firm but not painful. "Aina, these past weeks, I've felt more human than I have in years. Talking with you, laughing with you, just existing without the weight of tribal politics crushing every moment. Don't you feel it too?" She did. God's help her, she did. The ease of his company had become something she craved more than food or warmth. His laugh, rare but genuine, made something in her chest feel light. His stories painted pictures she wanted to walk into. The simple comfort of his presence had become necessary in a way that terrified her. But feelings didn't change facts. Didn't change the horns still calling across the tundra, growing closer. "Feelings don't matter," Aina said, though her voice shook. "We're from different worlds, Kor, worlds that want each other dead." "Then let them kill us," Kor said fiercely. "But not before we try. Not before we fight for something better than this endless cycle of hatred." The horns sounded again, much closer now. Aina could see movement on the horizon, dark shapes against the white. Multiple groups, converging on their position from different directions. Her people, his people, all hunting the same prize. Decision time. Aina grabbed her pack, shoving supplies inside with shaking hands. "There's a place," she said rapidly. "East, toward the rising sun. Old territory, so old neither tribe claims it anymore. The grandmother stones, we call them. Rock formations that might provide shelter. How far?" Kor was already moving, gathering his few possessions, testing his weight on his injured leg. 3 days, hard travel. "Maybe 4 with your injuries." Aina tied her pack closed, grabbed her spear. "We'll have to move fast, stay ahead of the hunting parties. If they catch us, they won't," Kor promised. "Lead the way." They left the cave at a run, or as close to a run as Kor could manage. Aina set a punishing pace, her hunter's instincts screaming at her to move faster, farther, to put distance between themselves and the converging tribes. Behind them, the horns continued their haunting calls, coordinating the hunt. The first day was hell. Kor's injuries, barely healed, protested every movement. Twice, Aina had to stop and rewrap his ribs when the binding loosened. But he never complained, never asked to slow. His jaw set in determination, he pushed forward, matching her stride for stride. They traveled through the night, not daring to stop for more than brief rests. The moon, nearly full, painted the snow silver and made navigation possible. Aina led them along forgotten game trails, through narrow passes between ice formations, anywhere that would hide their tracks or confuse pursuers. On the second day they heard voices, close, Too close. Aina pulled Kor behind an ice ridge, both of them pressing flat against the frozen wall, barely breathing. A stone wolf hunting party passed within spear-throwing distance, their conversation carrying clearly in the thin air. Found the cave. Signs of occupation. 2 people by the looks of it. Stone wolf? Unknown. Tracks lead east. We should follow. No, Chief's orders are to secure the mammoth meat first. We'll track the stragglers later. Aina felt Kor tense beside her at the mention of their chief. His hand found hers in the narrow space, squeezing briefly before releasing. A gesture of comfort, of solidarity. We're in this together, it said. After the hunting party passed, they continued their flight. But the close call had shaken them both. Someone knew they were out here. Someone was tracking them. It was only a matter of time before the pursuit became deliberate. They reached the Grandmother Stones on the evening of the 3rd day. The ancient rock formations rose from the tundra like frozen giants, weathered smooth by countless generations of wind and ice. Among them, Aina knew, were caves deep enough to hide in, defensible positions if it came to fighting. She led Kor through the maze of stones, following half-remembered paths from childhood explorations. Her father had brought her here once, told her stories of the old times when these stones had been sacred neutral ground, before the wars, before the hatred. Maybe, Aina thought desperately, they could be again. They found a cave in the deepest part of the stone maze, its entrance hidden by an overhang that would shield any firelight. Aina wanted to collapse, to sleep for days, but Kor was swaying on his feet, his face grey with exhaustion and pain. She got him settled first, checking his injuries, making sure nothing had torn during their desperate flight. We made it, Kor breathed, his eyes already closing. We're safe, for now, Aina said quietly. She didn't have the heart to tell him that safety was temporary, that eventually their tribes would find this place, that the peace they'd found in isolation couldn't last in the real world. But for tonight she let him believe. Let them both believe she was building up the fire when she heard it. The scrape of feet on stone, multiple sets of feet moving with practiced stealth. Aina's hand flew to her spear, but before she could grab it, figures emerged from the shadows. Sky elk hunters. A dozen of them, weapons drawn, faces painted for war. And at their head her chief Torak, his expression colder than the winter wind. Aina, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. Step away from the stone wolf. Behind her she heard Kor struggle to his feet despite his injuries. She felt him move to her side, refusing to let her face this alone, even though every rational thought screamed at him to run. Chief Torak, Aina said, keeping her voice steady through sheer force of will. This isn't what it looks like. It looks, Torak said coldly, like you're harboring an enemy, protecting the man whose people killed your cousin, broke tribal law, committed treason. She saved my life, Kor said, his voice rough but clear. I would have died beneath that mammoth if not for her mercy. Whatever punishment you have, it should fall on me, not her. Oh, you'll be punished, Torak assured him. But she chose her path when she chose you over her tribe. More figures emerged from the darkness. Stone wolf warriors, their faces painted with the distinctive claw marks. And at their head, an older man with scars crisscrossing his features, his eyes hard as flint. Kor, the scarred man said, and his voice held surprised recognition. You live, despite your best efforts, Ragnar, Kor replied coldly. Aina's blood froze. Ragnar, the Stone Wolf chief's second, the man who led their raids. The man personally responsible for her cousin's death. And he knew Kor, knew him well enough to be surprised at his survival. Who are you? She whispered to Kor. Though dread told her she already knew the answer, Kor's jaw tightened. I'm sorry, Aina. I should have told you. I'm not just Stonewolf, I'm their chief. Or I was, before the council decided mercy made me weak. Before they decided peace with the Sky Elk would be our destruction, the world tilted beneath Aina's feet. She'd saved not just an enemy, but their leader, the man who'd ordered raids on her people. The man whose death would have saved countless lives, and somewhere along the way, impossibly, she'd fallen in love with. The cave filled with tension so thick it felt hard to breathe. Sky Elk and Stone Wolf warriors faced each other across the small space, weapons drawn, years of hatred crackling in the air between them. Aina stood frozen between the two groups, between her people and the man she'd chosen to save, her mind reeling from Kor's revelation. Chief. He was a chief, had been a chief, the leader of the people who'd caused her tribe so much pain. "You lied to me," she whispered, unable to look at him. "I omitted the truth," Kor said quietly. "Would you have saved me if you'd known? Would you have given me that chance?" Aina wanted to say yes, wanted to believe her mercy would have extended even that far. But honesty forced her to admit, "I don't know, which is why I didn't tell you." Kor's voice was gentle, understanding, which somehow made it worse. "I wanted you to see me as just a man, not a chief, not an enemy, just me." "Enough," Torak snapped. "Whatever happened between you is irrelevant. Aina, you will return to the Sky Elk camp to face judgment. The Stone Wolf chief will be executed, as should have been done when he first fell beneath that mammoth." "No," Ragnar said, his scarred face twisted with cruel satisfaction. "Kor is Stone Wolf business. He was exiled, stripped of his position, left to die for his weakness. If he still lives, he faces Stone Wolf justice, not yours. He's on Sky Elk land," Torak countered. "Under Sky Elk protection, apparently. That makes him ours." The two groups shifted closer, weapons rising. Aina could see it happening, could see how this would end. Blood on stone, bodies in snow, the fragile peace shattered forever, and for what? Pride. Hatred that none of them could even remember the origin of. "Stop!" Aina's voice cut through the tension like a blade. She stepped forward, placing herself directly between the two groups, arms spread wide. "Both of you, just stop!" "Aina," Torak warned, "move aside." "No." She held her ground, though her legs shook beneath her. "I won't watch you kill each other over a hatred that should have died generations ago." "Our peoples are enemies," Ragnar said coldly. "Have always been enemies. Your mercy doesn't change that." "Maybe it should," Aina shot back. "Maybe we should ask ourselves why we're enemies. What started this? Because I've asked every elder in my tribe, and none of them can tell me. It's just how things are." "Well, maybe how things are is wrong." "She's right." Kor's voice was quiet, but carried absolute conviction. He moved to stand beside Aina, facing both groups despite his injuries. "I was exiled because I dared suggest peace, because I looked at our people starving through harsh winters, losing hunters to pointless raids, and I asked if there might be a better way. A way where Sky Elk and Stone Wolf could trade instead of kill, could share hunting grounds instead of fighting over them, could be allies against the harsh land instead of enemies despite it." "Weakness," Ragnar spat. "The same weakness that got you cast out. Is it weakness," Kor asked, "to want your people to survive, to thrive instead of just endure? We waste so much energy fighting each other when the real enemy is winter, is starvation, is the land itself." "He's not wrong," one of the Sky Elk hunters said quietly. Others murmured agreement, quickly silenced by Torak's glare, but Aina had heard it. A crack in the certainty, a moment of doubt. She pressed the advantage. "These past weeks I've lived with a Stone Wolf," she said, her voice growing stronger. "Eaten with him, talked with him, saved his life and had him save mine in return. And I learned something. Under the tribal marks, under the hatred we're taught, he's just a man, no different from any Sky Elk warrior. He laughs at the same things, fears the same dangers, loves the same land." "Pretty words," Torak said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. "But the dead can't be brought back by speeches." "No," Aina agreed. "They can't, and I grieve for my cousin every day. But killing Kor won't bring her back either. It will just add one more body to a pile that stretches back before any of us were born." "When does it end, Chief Torak? When both tribes are extinct? When we've killed every last enemy until there's no one left to kill?" Silence fell in the cave. Aina could see her words working on them, see doubt creeping into faces painted for war. Even Torak looked uncertain, his weapon lowering slightly. Then Ragnar laughed, harsh and bitter. "A beautiful dream, girl. But dreams don't fill empty bellies or avenge fallen warriors. You want to make peace? Then explain to my people why they should forgive yours for the raid that killed 17 stone wolves 3 summers ago. 17. Torak's head snapped toward the scarred warrior. We lost 5 in that raid. It was your people who attacked us, defending our territory from sky elk invaders, Ragnar snarled back. You crossed into our hunting grounds. Those grounds have been ours for 10 generations. They were stone wolf land before your grandfather's grandfather was born. Einar watched the argument escalate, saw how quickly old wounds reopened, how easily hatred flared back to life. But she also saw something else. Confusion on both sides. Warriors exchanging glances, questioning looks. Because the stories didn't match. Each tribe had a different version of every conflict, each convinced of their own righteousness. What if they were both wrong? How do you know? Einar asked quietly. The question cut through the shouting, creating sudden silence. How do any of us know what really happened? We weren't there. We only know the stories our elders tell us. Stories passed down, changed with each telling. What if the truth got lost somewhere along the way? What are you suggesting? Torak asked warily. I'm suggesting, Einar said, choosing her words carefully, that maybe we've been fighting over memories instead of reality. Fighting because our parents fought, because their parents fought, all the way back to some original conflict that none of us remember correctly. And in the process, we've forgotten how to see each other as people. She turned to face the stone wolf warriors. I'm Sky Elk. You're taught to hate me, to see me as an enemy who wants to destroy you. But I'm also a daughter, a hunter, someone who loves the way the sky looks at dawn and who fears dying alone in the cold. Just like you. Then she faced her own people. And Kor is Stonewolf. We're taught he's a monster. But he's also someone who risked everything to try to make peace, who was betrayed by his own people for daring to imagine something better, who laughed at my terrible jokes and shared his food when I was hungry. He's a man. Just a man. Like any of us. Kor stepped forward, his voice steady despite the weapons still pointed at him. Einar's right. And I'm proof that change is possible. I was raised to hate the sky elk with every breath, told stories of your cruelty, your treachery. But then this woman saved my life, even knowing what I was. She chose mercy over hatred, and in doing so, she showed me that everything I'd been taught might be wrong. One woman's mercy doesn't erase generations of bloodshed, Ragnar growled. But his voice lacked its earlier conviction. No, Kor agreed, but it's a start. And if we don't start somewhere, we'll never stop. We'll just keep killing each other until there's nothing left but ghosts and regrets. One of the younger Sky Elk warriors, barely old enough to bear the tribal marks, spoke up hesitantly. My mother tells stories of a time before the wars, when the tribes would meet for festivals, would trade goods. She says her grandmother remembered it. Before something went wrong, my grandfather spoke of the same, a stone wolf hunter admitted. Said there was a betrayal, but no one remembers what it was. Just that we've been enemies ever since. The cave erupted in murmurs as warriors from both sides began sharing similar stories, fragments of a past before the hatred, before the wars. A time when Sky Elk and Stone Wolf had been, if not friends, at least not mortal enemies. Einar felt hope kindle in her chest, fragile as new fire, but growing stronger. Then maybe, she said softly, it's time we remember that past. Time we choose to be something other than enemies. Torak and Ragnar exchanged a long look across the cave. Years of rivalry, of battles fought and comrades lost hung between them. But Einar also saw something else in their eyes. Exhaustion, a weariness that came from fighting a war neither truly understood. What do you propose? Torak asked finally. Even if we wanted peace, our people would never accept it. Too much blood has been spilled. Then we give them a reason to accept it, Kor said. He reached out, took Einar's hand in his, and she let him, her fingers intertwining with his, despite the dozens of eyes watching. A symbol, something that proves peace is possible. What kind of symbol? Ragnar demanded. Einar's heart hammered as she realized what Kor was suggesting. It was insane. It was impossible. It would require both of them to give up everything they'd known, to step into an uncertain future with no guarantee of success. It was also the only way forward. "A joining," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Between Sky Elk and Stone Wolf, between Kor and me. Let us be the bridge between our peoples." The cave exploded in shouts of protest and disbelief. Warriors from both sides roared their opposition, called it madness, threatened violence. But Torak held up his hand, demanding silence, and slowly, grudgingly, the cave quieted. "You would do this?" he asked Aina, his eyes searching her face. "Bind yourself to a stone wolf? Leave your tribe, your family, everything you've known?" "I would," Aina said, and found she meant it. "If it means no more children dying in raids, no more families torn apart by hatred, no more winters wondering if we'll survive because we're too busy fighting each other to prepare properly. Yes, I would do this." Torak turned to Kor. "And you? You were chief once. Would you truly give up any chance of reclaiming that position for a Sky Elk woman?" "I would," Kor said without hesitation. "I already lost my position trying to make peace. Losing it wasn't the mistake. Giving up on peace would be—" Ragnar stepped forward, his scarred face twisted with emotion Aina couldn't read. For a long moment he simply stared at Kor, and Aina braced herself for violence. Then slowly, the old warrior knelt. "You were right," he said hoarsely. "You were always right, and we were fools to exile you. Fools to choose pride over survival. If you're willing to try this, to bridge the gap between our peoples, then the Stone Wolf clan will stand with you." Gasps echoed through the cave. Stone Wolf warriors exchanged shocked glances, but none protested. If Ragnar, their war leader, supported this, then they would follow. All eyes turned to Torak. The Sky Elk chief stood silent for what felt like an eternity. Aina could see the war happening behind his eyes, duty wrestling with possibility, tradition fighting innovation. Finally he sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of generations. "My chief's daughter died in a Stone Wolf raid," he said quietly. "She was younger than you, Aina. I swore I would never forgive, never forget. I swore vengeance until my last breath." Aina's heart sank. She'd lost. They'd lost. But Torak wasn't finished. "But I also swore to protect my people, to ensure their survival. And if that means swallowing my pride, my hatred, my grief, then perhaps that's the burden of leadership." He met Aina's eyes, and she saw pain there, but also resignation. "You have my blessing. But know this, if you fail, if this peace shatters, the blood will be on your hands." "I understand," Aina whispered. Torak turned to address both groups. "Hear me, Sky Elk and Stone Wolf. What happens here today will echo through generations. We stand at a crossroads. Down one path lies more war, more death. The same cycle we've walked for so long, we've forgotten why we started. Down the other lies uncertainty, risk, the possibility that our children might grow up knowing peace instead of hatred." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I choose uncertainty. I choose the risk. And I ask you to choose with me." Slowly, one by one, warriors from both tribes lowered their weapons. Some did it eagerly, relief evident on their faces. Others did it reluctantly, clearly struggling with years of ingrained hatred. But they did it. The weapons went down. Aina felt tears streaming down her face, though she couldn't say exactly when they'd started. Beside her, Kor's hand tightened on hers, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "We'll need to move carefully," Ragnar said, his practical nature reasserting itself. "Can't just announce peace and expect everyone to accept it. There will be those in both tribes who resist." "Agreed," Torak said. "We start small. Shared hunting grounds. Trade agreements. Let our people see the benefits before we push for full integration." "And Aina and Kor?" one of the Sky Elk hunters asked. "Where will they live?" "Can't be in either camp, not at first. Too much risk of violence from those who can't let go of the old ways." "Here," Aina said suddenly. "The grandmother stones. This was neutral ground once. It can be again. We'll build a settlement here, halfway between Sky Elk and Stone Wolf territory. A place where both tribes can meet, can trade, can learn to see each other as people instead of enemies." "A third tribe," Kor added, warming to the idea. "Made up of those from both sides who choose peace. Not Sky Elk, Not Stonewolf, something new. The Bridge Tribe, one of the younger warriors suggested. Because you'll be the bridge between our peoples. Murmurs of approval rippled through the cave. The name felt right, not tied to either past, but reaching toward a different future. Over the following weeks, the impossible slowly became reality. Warriors from both tribes who'd been ready to kill each other instead worked together to build shelters among the grandmother stones. Hunters who'd tracked each other as prey now tracked game together, sharing techniques and stories. Healers exchanged knowledge of herbs and treatments. It wasn't easy. Arguments erupted regularly. Old prejudices flared. Twice fights broke out that required Torak and Ragnar to intervene personally. But each time, instead of dissolving into violence, the conflicts were resolved through talking, through compromise. Through the difficult work of seeing the enemy as human, Aina and Kor's joining ceremony took place as the first snow melted into spring runoff. Both tribes attended, gathering among the ancient stones as witnesses. The ceremony blended traditions from both peoples, creating something entirely new. Aina wore the red and white of Sky Elk. Kor bore the blue and black of Stone Wolf. Together, they painted each other's faces with both sets of marks, symbolizing their unity. "I was taught to hate you," Aina said as part of the ceremony, her voice carrying across the gathered tribes. "Taught that Stone Wolf meant enemy, meant danger, but you taught me that love is stronger than hatred. That mercy isn't weakness, that one person's choice to see humanity in another can change the world. I was taught that survival meant strength, and strength meant conquest," Kor replied. "But you showed me that true strength is choosing peace when war would be easier. Choosing compassion when cruelty would be simpler. You saved my life beneath that mammoth, and in doing so, you saved both our peoples from a future of endless war." They pressed their painted foreheads together, mingling the colors, creating something new. And as the tribes erupted in cautious celebration, Aina allowed herself to believe, truly believe, that they might actually succeed. The months that followed were hard work. The Bridge Tribe settlement grew slowly, expanding from simple shelters to permanent structures. Those who joined came with skills to share: Sky Elk knowledge of southern hunting grounds, Stone Wolf expertise in ice fishing and northern survival. What had been weaknesses apart became strengths together. Trade routes opened between the territories. Sky Elk brought furs and dried berries south. Stone Wolf sent smoked fish and carved ivory north. What had been stolen in raids now changed hands peacefully, benefiting both sides. Food stores filled as cooperation replaced conflict. Children from both tribes played together among the stones, too young to remember the old hatreds, but the greatest change was subtler. In the way hunters from different tribes shared meals without suspicion, in the jokes traded across campfires, in the friendships forming between people who'd been raised to see each other as monsters. Not everyone accepted the new way. Some from both tribes refused to participate, retreating into isolated camps where they nursed their hatred. A few attempted raids, trying to reignite the old conflicts. But each time, warriors from both tribes stood together to stop them. To prove that the peace was real, was worth defending, Sinner stood at the edge of the settlement one evening, watching the sun set over the tundra, painting the snow in shades of orange and gold. Kor came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Thinking?" he asked softly. "Remembering," Aina replied. "That day beneath the mammoth. How close I came to walking away, to leaving you to die because of the marks on your face. But you didn't," Kor said. "You chose mercy, chose to see the man instead of the enemy. That choice changed everything." "One choice," Aina mused. "One moment of deciding to be better than what I was taught. It seems too small to have mattered so much. That's how all great changes start," Kor said. "With one person deciding that how things have always been isn't good enough. With one act of impossible mercy that shouldn't work but somehow does." Aina turned in his arms, studying his face. The blue and black marks were still there, but she barely saw them anymore. She just saw Kor, the man who'd risked everything for peace. who'd been willing to die for the possibility of something better. "I love you," she said simply. "I don't know if I've said that enough, but I do. I love you for being brave enough to imagine a different world, for being strong enough to fight for it even when it seemed impossible." "I love you too," Kor replied, his lips curving in that smile she'd come to treasure. "For seeing me when I was invisible, for saving me when I'd been left to die, for believing that mercy could be strength." They stood together as darkness fell, watching their impossible settlement come to life with cooking fires and laughter. Children ran between the shelters, their shouts echoing off the ancient stones. Hunters returned with the day's kill, sky elk and stone wolf, working together to butcher and preserve the meat. Elders from both tribes sat in council, discussing trade routes and dispute resolution. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. There would always be those who clung to the old ways, who couldn't let go of generations of hatred. The work of peace was harder and longer than any war, but it was possible. That was the miracle. That one choice beneath a dead mammoth had proven it was possible. Somewhere in the gathering darkness, a child laughed. The sound carried across the settlement, pure and joyful, untainted by tribal divisions or ancient feuds. The sound of a future they were building together, one impossible choice at a time. Aina smiled and let herself believe in that future. In a world where sky elk and stone wolf were just names, not battle lines. Where children could grow up without learning to hate. Where mercy wasn't foolishness but wisdom. Where love could bridge any divide, even one carved by generations of bloodshed. The mammoth's death had seemed like the end of something, but in truth it had been a beginning. The beginning of everything that mattered. And as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Aina whispered a prayer of thanks to whatever spirits had guided her that day, for the storm that trapped them together, for the courage to save an enemy, for the impossible love that had changed two tribes forever. One choice, one act of mercy. Sometimes that was all it took to change the world.